How you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Tesvav, Daf 15 of Masechta BavaBasra. Daf Tesvav is a gewaltige Daf. It's awesome. It's really, really awesome. It's like pretty cool. So we talk about like the Nevi'im and the Ksuvim, and then we get started on who wrote them. Very interesting stuff. And then we get started on an Agadita, a long Agadita about Eov, Job. And that is going to be about half of today's daf. We're going to stop kind of a little bit high up on today's daf with like quite a nice healthy chunk to do tomorrow. But it starts it kind of starts like a new chapter of the Job Agadita that really is going to take us for a while. So I figured it would make sense to just start from there tomorrow. So tomorrow is going to be an exceptionally large daf, all Agadita. But so the next 2 days are going to be very cool Agadita. Here we go. And truth is, we also have a chunk to do also on Yudalit Amud Beis, because that also was kind of an appropriate stopping point, I felt. So, okay, we're going to start in Daf Yudalit Amud Beis, 3 lines before it gets wide. Sidron Shel Nevi'im. Here is the order of the prophets. So my understanding is that, meaning if you are going to write the prophets in a scroll, so you would write them in the following order, meaning it is not the way that this is not the same order as in our Tanakhs. But it seems that if you were to write a scroll like Reb Meir or like Reb Yehuda with all of the prophets, you would write them in the following order. Yoshua, Vishoftim, Shmuel, Milachim. Okay, so far it's the same as our Nevi'im. But now Yirmiyah, Yechezkel, Yeshaya, Treyasar, Shnemasar. So meaning in our Navis we have Yeshaya before Yirmiyah, whereas over here, Yeshaya is after Yechezkel. Mirte Hosea, Kodim, but 1 second, shouldn't Hosea come before Yeshaya? The pasuk says, Tchilas Dvar Hashem beHosea. I believe it's the first pasuk in Hosea. It says, the second pasuk. Okay, Tchilas Dvar Hashem beHosea. That the beginning of the word of God to Hosea. So we want to say it means that he was the first prophet. Hosea was Hosea, the first prophet. Moshe v'ad Hosea. What do you mean? There was Moshe Rabbeinu. There was other Nevi'im between Moshe Rabbeinu and Hosea. What do you mean he was the first prophet? Kama Nevi'im hayu. Ve'amar Reb Yechanan says Reb Yechanan sha'oya tchila la'arba Nevi'im shenisnabu b'oisei haperek. He was the first of the 4 prophets who prophesied during that time, during that period. And the following are the 4 prophets: Hosea, Yeshaya, Amos, Umicha. So why don't we have Hosea come before Yeshaya? Why is Hosea part of the Treyasar, which is after Yeshaya? Kevin dechsiv nevuose gabe Chagai, Zechariah, uMalachi. Since Hosea was written down, since Hosea was only written down later on together with the books, with the prophecies of Chagai, Zechariah, and Malachi, the Chagai, Zechariah, uMalachi, Sof Nevi'im Havu, and Chagai, Zechariah, and Malachi were at the end, they were the last prophets. So Choshev Lei Behadayu, so we record Hosea together with them in the Trey Osir. So because Hosea was written down, does Rashi say anything about that? No. Okay. Since Hosea was only written down later on together with Chagai, Zechariah, and Malachi, so therefore it's included in the Trey Osir. But still, why do you have to include Hosea in the Trey Osir? Why not write it separately in its own book, and have it, and then that book would be written before Yeshaya? Aidi de Zutter Mirkas. Well, because Hosea is small, I don't think it's super small, but I think relative to think relative to the Trey also, I think it's probably on the longer end. But I think, but relative to like Yeshaya, it's small. So as like the other Nevi'im that have like their own books, it would be considered small. So therefore, because it's small, it might get lost. So if we have it together with the other Trey also, it would be preserved. Mirde. Yeshaya kodem Yirmiyah v'Yechezkel likdamei Yeshaya b'Reisha, but chronologically, Yeshaya was before Yirmiyah and Yechezkel, which is probably why it's why it's in our Tanakhs before Yirmiyah and Yechezkel. So if chronologically Yeshaya was prior to Yirmiyah and Yechezkel, so why not have the book of Yeshaya before Yirmiyah and Yechezkel? Why does the Brisa say that Yeshaya is after Yirmiyah and Yechezkel? So Kevin de Melachim, Sofei Churbina. Well, because since Melachim, the book of Kings, at the end describes the destruction of Jerusalem. V'Yirmiyah Kulei Churbina, and Jeremiah is all about destruction. V'Yechezkel and Ezekiel Reishei Churbina v'Sefer Nechemta starts out with destruction, but then shifts to consolation. V'Yeshaya Kulei Nechemta, and Yeshaya is primarily consolation. So Samchinun Churbina l'Churbina v'Nechemta l'Nechemta. So we juxtapose destruction to destruction and consolation to consolation. So therefore, Melachim, which ends with destruction, is next to Yirmiyah, which is all about destruction, and which is next to Yechezkel, which starts with destruction and ends with consolation, which is then next to Yeshaya, which is primarily consolation. Gewaldige stuff, right? Right. Sidron shel Ksuvin. And here is the order of the writings. Rus, V'Sefer Tilim, V'Iyov, Umishlei, Koheles, Shir Ashirim, V'Kinos, which is Eicha, Daniel Megillas Esther, Ezra V'Divrei Hayom. Ulman Omer Iyov Bimei Moshe Hoya. And according to the opinion who says, that we're going to learn later on, I believe, yes, that Job was during the days of Moses. Well, if that's the case, well then Job should be the first of the writings before Rus. So, according to the opinion who says that Job was during the days of Moses, so we should have Job first before Rus. Aschule b'furanusa lo maschalinon. Well, Job is deals with some heavy stuff, and therefore we're not going to start with punishment and heavy things. Rus nami puranus he, but Rus is also heavy stuff, right? Talks about how her husband died, and her brother-in-law died, and her father-in-law died, and there was a famine. That's not fun stuff. So Puran is the Islay Achis, yes, but it's a rough story that has a good and a happy ending. Rus. Why is her name Rus? Sheyotza mimena David sheriveyu la'Kadosh Baruch Hu b'shiris v'sushbachis. Because ultimately, her uncle was King David, who serenaded the Eibishter with songs and praises. So because Rus has kind of a happy ending, ends ultimately on a positive beat, so therefore we can start with Rus. Umi Kosvan. Now, who were the authors of these books? Umi Kosvan. Who wrote these books? Who authored these books? Moshe. This is gewaldige stuff, friends. Moshe Kosav Sifro. So Moses wrote the Pentateuch. Ufarshas Bilam, as well as Parshas Bilam. Rashi says, we mention Bilam separately, even though it's part of Bamidbar, right? It's taka coming up. I don't know. I'm very far ahead these days, Cheva. So I don't even know what parsha. This might taka be the Parshas Balak by the time this comes live. I don't know. Akoponim. So also Parshas, because that's not directly kind of like part of like, the Moses kind of stuff. That's more like prophecy of Bilam and kind of stuff like that, and his parables. But anyways, Moses wrote those as well. Ve'Iyov and Job. Yoshua kosav sifro. Joshua wrote Joshua. V'shmone psukim sheba Torah. And the final 8 verses in the Pentateuch, which describe how Moshe died, Joshua wrote those. We're going to see machlokas about that soon. Shmuel kosav sifro. Samuel wrote Samuel. V'shoftim and the judges. V'rus and Rus. David kosav sefer Tilim. King David authored the Psalms. Aidei Asar Zikanim, together with 10 elders. Aidei Odom Arishon. Aidei Malkitzedek. Vaidei Avram. Vaidei Moshe. Vaidei Haman. Vaidei Yedusin. Vaidei Osoph. That's 7. Vaidei Shlosha Bnei Korach, as well as together with 3 sons of Korach. Yirmiyah kosav sifro. Jeremiah wrote Jeremiah. V'sefer Melachim, and the book of Kings. V'kinos and Eicha. Chizkiah v'siyoso. What's Chizkiah in English? Well, Yechezkel is Ezekiel. So is Chizkiah, I don't know, what the heck is Chizkiah in English? I guess just Chizkiah. So Chizkiah v'siyato kosvu, Chizkiah and his people wrote Yeshaya, Mishlei, Shir Ashirim v'Koheles. Anshe Knesses Hagadola kosvu, the men of the great assembly wrote Yechezkel v'Shneim Osir, Daniel u'Megillas Esther. Ezra kosav sifro. Ezra wrote his book, wrote Ezra. V'yachas shel divrei hayomim ad lo, and the genealogy, I think so, yeah, in the with the yichas in divrei hayomim until him. Misayele l'Rab, this supports Rab's opinion. Dam Rav Yudah Amar Rab lo ola Ezra mibavel ad sheyiches atzmo ve'ola, that Ezra only made aliyah to Eretz Yisrael from Bavel after he recorded the genealogy until himself, and then he made aliyah. Uman aske, and who finished Divrei Yomim? Nehemiah ben Chachalya. Omar Mar, we said earlier, Yoshua kosav sifro v'shmona psukim sheba Torah. Ooh, this is gewaldig. So we had said earlier that Joshua wrote Joshua, as well as the final 8 verses in the Pentateuch. Tanya Commander Omar Shmona Psukim Shabbator Yoshua Kisavun. So this Brisa clearly is of the opinion that Joshua wrote the final 8 verses of the Pentateuch. The Tanya, as we learn in the Brisa, Vayamos Sham Moshe Eved Hashem. The pasuk says in the end of the Pentateuch that Moses died there, the servant of God. So now Efsher Moshe. So in parentheses it says Mace, but there's a different gear that says Chai. Efsher Moshe Chai. Is it possible that Moses is alive because of Moshe, and he's saying that he died even though he's alive? That doesn't make sense. Ela ad kan kosav Moshe mikan va'elach kosav Yoshua divrei Yehuda. Rather, until that point, the Pentateuch was written by Moses, but the final 8 verses, when it says that he died, were written by Joshua. That is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. V'amri lo, Rabbi Nechem, some taka say Rabbi Nechem's opinion. Omar le Reb Shimon. Reb Shimon responds, Efsher Sefer Torah Chaser Oz Achas. Could it be possible that you have a Sefer Torah that's missing even one letter, and says in the Torah that that Moses says Lakoyach sefer HaTorah hazeh, take this sefer Torah, and it's lacking. So Elo ad kana Kadosh Baruch Hu Omer uMoshe Omer v'Chosef. Rather, until that point, says Reb Shimon, the Eibishter dictated to Moses, and he wrote it down, and he repeated it, just to confirm that he heard it right, and then he wrote it down. Mikan ve'elach, but from that point on, the final 8 verses, HaKadosh Baruch Hu Omer, the Eibishter dictated, uMoshe Kosev b'dema, and Moses wrote it with tears. He didn't use ink, he used tears. And we see that that the prophets wrote down their writings via dictation, as it says by Jeremiah, Vayomer Elohim Baruch, that Baruch said, Mipiv Yikra Eli Eis Kol Advarim Ha'eleh, that Jeremiah reads out to me these things, Vani Kosev al Sefer B'dio, and I write it, I record it on a book with ink. Like, who does the statement of Rabbi Yehoshua bar Abba Amarav, Gidol Amarav, go like? Shmona Psukim Shabbat Torah, the final 8 verses of the Pentateuch, Yochid Korei Osan, one, where you don't divide it up, you don't make Hosafis over there, one person reads all 8 of them, right? One Aliyah is for all 8 of them. Lema Delok Reb Shimon, let's say it's unlike Reb Shimon, right? Let's say it's like Reb Yehuda, who says that the final 8 verses were written by Joshua, so it's like a separate thing. So therefore, those final 8 verses that were written by Joshua, you don't divide those up between 2 aliyahs. But Reb Shimon says it's no different than the rest of the Torah. It was written by Moshe as well. So why not divide it? If you want to make a Osafa, make a Osafa. Afilu Tamer Reb Shimon al v'ishtenu ishtenu. You can even touch that that brisa is like, but that statement is like Reb Shimon as well. And Reb Shimon, even though Reb Shimon says that the last 8 verses were written by Moses, they were written with tears. They were not written with ink. The rest of the Sefer Torah was written with ink. These 8 verses were written with tears, and therefore that makes them different, unique. And because those 8 verses are unique, even Reb Shimon would say that they should be read by one aliyah. Yoshua Kosav Sifro. We said that Joshua wrote Joshua. But in Joshua it says, Vayamos Yoshua ben Nun Eved Hashem, that Joshua, the son of Nun, the servant of God, died. So how could he have written that? The Aske Elazar finished it. V'oksiv Elazar ben Aharon Meis. But it says Oichit in Yoshua that Elazar Oichit died. The Aske Pinchas, his son Pinchas, wrote that. Shmuel Kosav Sifra, we said that Samuel wrote Samuel. V'oksiv Shmuel Meis. But it says Dorin that Samuel died. The Aske God Achose v'Nosin Hanovi. It was completed by God Achose and Nosin Hanovi. David Kosav Sefer Tilim al Yidei Asar Zikenim. We said that King David wrote the book of Psalms together with 10 elders. V'lechshov Nami Eisen o Ezrochi. Why not also include in the list Eisen o Ezrochi? Rav says Rav Eisen or Ezrochi Zehu Avram. Well, we listed Avram as part of the 10, and Eisen or Ezrochi is Avram. Ksivach, it says over here Eisen Ezrochi. It says in Tilim Maskele Eisen Ezrochi. Uchzivasam, and it says in Yeshaya Miheir Mi Mizrach Tzedek Yikre'eu L'Raglav. And that's Mizrach, right? So Ezrochi and Mizrach are both reference to the east. And the first pasuk, of course, is a reference to Eisen and Ezrochi. The second pasuk is a reference to Avram. So we see that Avram and Eisen Ezrochi are the same person. Kachoshev Moshe Kachoshev Haman. We mentioned in the list Moses, but Oichit Haman, but aren't they the same person? V'amar Rav Haman ze Moshe. But Rav says that Haman is Moshe. So why does it mention both of them? Ksivacha Haman uchsivasam b'chol beisi ne'amonu. It says over here Haman, and Oichit says by Moses b'chol beisi ne'amon, which is Mehaman. So Trey Haman Hava. There were 2 Hamans. So I guess one Haman was the Haman in the Psalms, and but then there's also like Tefillah LaMoshe, right? So that's Oichit. Two separate Haman and Moses. Wow, Cheve, my throat is getting dry. It's the passion. It's the passion dries out my throat, I think, because I'm using a lot of energy. Moshe Kosav Sifro Farshas Bilam ve'Iyov. Moses wrote the Pentateuch and Bilam and Job. This supports Reb Levi Bar Lachma. The Amar Reb Levi Bar Lachma. Iyov Bimei Moshe Hoyo. That Job lived during the time of Moses. It says over here, Miyitein Efo v'Yikosvun Mila. It says in Job that it should be that my word should be written. It says Efo. And it says by Moses, Uvamo Yivoda Uvame Yivoda Efo. That how will it be known? Right, Efo. Okay. So it says Apho by Job, it says Apho by Moses. So therefore Job lived during the time of Moses. Ve'ema b'mei Yitzchok, but maybe Job lived during the days of Isaac. Tichsiv mi Apho hu atzotzai. Ve'ema b'mei Yaakov. Tichsiv imken Apho zosasu. Ve'ema b'mei Yosef. Tichsiv Apho imroim. One second, it says Apho by Isaac, it says Apho by Jacob, it says Apho by Joseph. So maybe Job lived during that period. Lo sagadai technisht, dichsiv, because the pasuk says, at the end of that pasuk, where it says Miyetein Apho v'yikosvu mila, then it says Miyetein ba'sefer v'yuchoku. Umoshe hu de'ikri mechokek. So it says, and it will be placed in the sefer, and yuchoku, I guess, etched. And Moshe is the one who's called the Mechokek, the lawmaker. So then it says that by God that they chose the area in the Ever Anor because that is where Mechokek Sofun, that is where Moses is buried. Okay, now we're going to see all sorts of opinions about when Job lived. Rava Amar says, Rava Iyov bime miraglim oyo, that Job lived during the time of the spies, when the spies went to Israel. It says in Job, Ish hoyo be'eretz Utz, Iyov shmo. It says that by Job that he lived in Utz. And it says in Parashat Shlach, Ayesh bo eitz. So it says eitz. So by Job it says Utz, and by the Meraglim it says eitz, midami, but those aren't the same. Och Utz, ochem eitz. One's Utz, one's eitz. Achikamid is what it says. Achikamilu Moshe Lisa. Yeah, it's nothing to do with Utz and Eitz. You're right; those are different things. But what Moshe was saying when he says Ayesh ba Eitz im Ayin, what he was really saying is Yeshno leoso Adam sheshnosov aruchis ke'etz umegan al doro ke'etz. Moses was saying when you to the spies that when you go to Israel, check to see if Job, whose years are as long as a tree, right, that he lives a long time, and he protects his generation like a tree, go and see if he's still there. I guess that this assumption would be that he was not Jewish, I think would be the point. And wait 1 second. I think that this would imply that he was not Jewish, I think. And that he I guess would protect on the people of Eretz Yisrael, I guess. So I think that's what's going on, right? That Moses said, go check if he's still alive. So we see that, so that's Rava. So Rava says that Job lived during the time of the Meraglim. Yosef Omer Rabbanon Kame di Reb Shmuel. A certain rabbi was sitting before Reb Shmuel bar Nachmani. V'Yosef v'Kamer, and he says, Iyov lo haya v'lo nivra. Job never existed. Ela mashal haya. It's pashit. The whole thing's a parable. Job never existed. There was never a person named Job. It was a parable. Omar le. Reb Shmuel bar Nachmani responds, And Lech Amar Kra, the pasuk says, Ish haya be'eretz utz Iyov shmo. What do you mean? The pasuk says there was a person named Job, and he lived in a place called Utz. Elamiato, to which this rabbi responds that Nosan Anovi, when he says to King David, Vilarosh ein kol ki im kivsa achas getana shekona v'yichayeo v'gomer, and he gives this parable about this person who's got all he has is the sheep, and it says over there, no. Vatihi lo kivas. Vatihi, it says v'hoyo there oichit. So meaning Rav Shmuel bar Nachmani, he says no. Obviously Job lived. It says that they right. It says what's the pasuk? Right, ish hoyo be'eretz utz. To which this rabbi says, yeah, but also says in the parable that Nathan the prophet says to King David, he talks about this person, and he's got the sheep, and it says Vatihi, and it was like a daughter. Now that was just a parable. So just because it says Haya doesn't mean that it's not a parable. Sorry for the double negative. Mi hava ela moshe ba'alma, ochanami moshe ba'alma. So just like by Nathan the prophet, it was a parable. So here oichet, the rabbi argues that it's a parable. Im kain shmo v'shem iro lamali. To which Reb Shmuel bar Nachman responds, yeah, but still, if it was just a parable, why would you have to give not just his name, but oichet? Well, why would you have to give his name? Why would you have to give specifically where he lived? He was a real person who lived in a real place. If it was just a parable, you wouldn't need that level of detail. Reb Yochanan, Reb Elazar, Dar Mitavayu, says Reb Yochanan, Reb Elazar, Iyov me'ole gola haya. That says Reb Yochanan and Reb Elazar that Job was one of the Jews who made aliyah from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael. Uveis midrashay b'Tveria, and his bismedrash was in Tiberias. Hoya. Meizvei meishnoso shel Iyov. One second, we have a contradiction that the years of Job were Mishah shenichnesu Yisrael limitzroyim ve'ad sheyotzu. We have a brayso that says that the years of Job were from when the Yidden went into Egypt until they left. So not much later on, after the destruction of the first temple and Babylonian exile. So Ema Kimi Shah Shenichnesu Yisrael limitzrayim ve'ad Shah sheyotzu. No, say that no, it's not from the time that they got to Egypt until the time that they left, but the equivalent of that amount of time, i.e., he lived for 210 years. Meisvei, we have a kasha that Rabbi Yochanan was betzim saying that Job was a Jew. But Meisvei, we have a kasha, Shiva Nevi'im, there were 7 prophets, Nisnabu le'umis ha'olam, prophesied for the nations of the world. Be'elu and these are them: Bilam, Ve'aviv, his father, Ve'iyov, Eliphaz HaTemani, Uvilda Ashuchi, Ve'tzofar Na'amasi, Ve'eliu ben Berechel, Abuzi. So we see that Job was a prophet for the Umas Ha'olam, not a Jew. V'letaimech Eliu ben Brachel, Lav, Mi'Yisrael Hava. But one second, you claim that Eliu ben Brachel was not a Jew? V'oksiv, it says Mishpachas Ram, that it comes from the family of Ram. So either that means that meaning they would only mention like his name if he was a Jew, like his name and his family's name if he was a Jew, or maybe it's saying that it came from Abraham. But the point is that Eliu ben Brachel was a Jew. So that list is not a list of non-Jews. It could even be a Jew. Eliu ben Baracha was a Jew who prophesied for the nations of the world. Hachanami, here oichit. Iyov invui inve leumis ha'olam. That Job oichit was a Jew, but he prophesied for the nations of the world. Atukulu nevi'e milo invui leumis ha'olam. But then what's unique about these 7? All prophets also prophesy for the nations of the world. Then what's unique about this list of 7? If we're saying that they're Jews, but they prophesy for the Umas Ha'olam. All prophets are prophecy for the Umas Ha'olam. So Hasam Ikr Nevi Usayu li Yisrael, Hacha Ikr Nevi Usayu li Umas Ha'olam. The difference is that the other prophets primarily prophesied for the Yidden, whereas this list of prophets primarily prophesied for the Umas Ha'olam, and Job was on that list. Meisvei, we have a kasha. Chosid hoyo be'umas ha'olam ve'iov shmo, that there was a righteous fellow in the nations of the world, not a Jew, and his name was Job. V'lo bala olam ela, and he only came to this world k'dei lekabel scharo, to receive his reward. Hevi HaKadosh Baruch Hu of Yisurin, and then the Eibishter brought upon him of afflictions. Hischu mecharif megadev, but then he began cursing God. Kofal lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu, or cursing. And so Kofal lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu scharo ba'olam hazeh. So then the Eibishter doubled his reward ultimately in this world, k'dei letardu min ha'olam, so that ha'olam haba, that he won't have any share in the world to come, or at least a reduced share in the world to come. Now this, we're going to see tomorrow, Taka, an opinion that Job was not judged negatively for his response. But according to this, he was judged negatively, and he was from the Umas Ha'olam, and he came to this world to receive reward, but then because of the Yisurin, he then got upset and he started cursing, so God kind of gave him all of his reward in this world, so that he wouldn't get it in the next world. Fine. No. So Rabbi Yechanan was saying that Job made Aliyah from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael, and he was a Jew. Yet we just quoted a brisa that Job was from the Umas Ha'olam. So Tanoi, it's Take Amachloikes Tanoim. The Tanya that we learn in a brisa. Rabbi Eliezer, Io bimei shvot hashoftim hoyo, that Job was during the times of the judges. Shenema, as the pasuk says, Hein atem kulchem chazisem. You have seen what happens, I think, to somebody who misbehaves. V'lo mezeh hevel te'ebalu. So why do you do nonsense? I think Job is a very difficult book. And what is the generation that was all nonsense? It's the generation of the judges. I didn't know that. Okay, apparently the generation of the judges was not very good. Rabbi Shua ben Korcha says, that Job was during the days of Achashverosh. What's Achashverosh in English? Oh gosh. Shenemar is dude, I'm like fading. I'm not super fading, but I'm like a little bit fading. What time is it? It's probably not that late. I don't know, maybe it's like 6, 7 at night. I'm like tiny bit fading. But that's alright. This isn't hard stuff. We're almost done. So says Rabbi Shua ben Korcha that Job was during the times of Achashverosh. Shenemar, the Pasuk says by Job, V'lo nimtza noshim yofis ki bnos Eov. There were not women as beautiful as the daughters of Job, bechol haaretz, in all of the land. Ezu doshin is bakshubo noshim yofis. What was the generation where they were on the lookout for noshim yofis? Have omer zedor shel Achashverosh. That's during the generation of Achashverosh. Ve'ema b'mei David. But maybe I'll say it was during the time of King David. The Chsiv says by King David at the end of his life, that they also searched for a beautiful young woman. So Hasam bechol gvul Yisrael, by King David, who was throughout all the boundaries of Israel. Hacha, but over here it says bechol haaretz, in all of the land, which is like by Achashverosh when they searched throughout all the land. Reb Nosson says, Reb Nosson, Iyo bimei malchus shvahaya. Says Reb Nosson that Job was during the days of the king of Sheba, the kingdom of Sheba. Shenemar says, Vatipol shva vatikochim. That Sheba came and took the donkeys, I think. The Chacham say that Job was during the days of the Chaldeans or something. What are those? Shenemar, the pasuk says, Kasdim samu shlosha roshim, that the Kasdim came and they stole all the camels. V'yeshom, to those who say, Eob b'mei Yaakov hayo, that Job lived during the days of Jacob, v'Dino bas Yaakov noso, and he was married to Jacob's daughter Dina. It says in Job, Kidvar achas and nevalos to daberi, that his wife suggests that he curse God and just die. And he says that you're speaking like one of the nevalos. It says by Shem, ki nevala, also be Israel, that you did a nevala, so you make a gzei shava, nevala, to say that Job lived during the time of Jacob and he was married to his daughter Dinah. V'chulu tanoi svirlu di'iob mi Yisrael hava levar yesh omim. Out of all the opinions that we just saw, only the yesh omim who says that Job was during the time of Jacob says that he was from the Umas Ha'olam. All the other opinions, though, would say that he was a Jew. Because if it enters your mind that according to the other opinions, let's say like he was during the time of Achashverosh, let's say, and he was from the Umas Ha'olam, well then Basra Deshchiv Moshe, Mishayir Shchinal Ovdei Kochavim, after Moses passed away, there was no longer prophecy for the Umas Ha'olam. And I guess the assumption being that Job was a prophet. So if Job was a prophet who lived after the time of Moses, Memele, he was a Jew. Then Moses requested that the divine presence not be divinely present on Ovdei Kochavim, and that was granted to Moses. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, "V'neflinu ani v'amcha," that me and your nation will be separate. Rabbi Yochanan says, Rabbi Yochanan, Dor shel Eov shotov b'zima oyo. Says Rabbi Yochanan that the generation of Job was very, very inappropriate. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, Hein atem kulchem chazisem v'lo mezehevel te'ebalu. Okay, where's that pasuk from before? That you've all seen what happens if you misbehave and you're doing all this silly stuff. So it says chazisem, and it says shuvi shuvi ashulamis shuvi shuvi v'nechzebach. It says in Shir Hashirim that the Umas Ha'olam say to the Yidden, come back, and let's look at you, and that was for his nus. Ema ben Evuah, maybe chazon is like a prophecy. The chsiv chazon Yishai ben Amos. So maybe it means that they were like false prophesying. Imkein lamazeh hevel te'ebalu lamali. Then why do I need the pasuk to say that you are doing this silly stuff? If memela, it means that they were doing false prophecy, so memela, it's silly, so you don't need that part of the pasuk. I think that's what it means. But Rabbi Yochanan says, Rabbi Yochanan, what does the pasuk mean? That it was during the days of the judgments of the judges. So now, we had said earlier that that generation was not a good generation. A generation that judges its judges. Oh my Lord, the judge says to the person in court, Tolkesa mi bein shinecha, you have to remove this wood chip from your teeth, kilo, a minor infraction. Oh my Lord, you know what the litigant responds to the judge? Tolkora mi bein enecha, remove a huge beam from your forehead, kilo. The judge says, look, you're guilty of doing this thing. To which he says, the thing that you're saying I'm guilty of pales in comparison to the things you're guilty of. The judge says that your silver is full of dross. The heck is that? And the litigant says, your wine, I think it means, is diluted with water. You're saying I'm doing something wrong. You're also being dishonest. So anybody says that Queen Sheba was a woman, was Queen Sheba, is making a mistake. My Malka Shiva Malchusa Dishva. Malka Shiva doesn't mean the queen of Sheba, it means the kingdom of Sheba. Whew. Wow. Whew. Agadita is like a whole thing. It's not difficult, but it's a lot of exertion. But we learned the amazing stuff. We learned about the order of the prophets, the order of the writings, who wrote the prophets, who wrote the writings, all that kind of stuff. Who wrote the last verses of the Pentateuch, right? Who wrote Job? When did Job live? All this stuff is super interesting. Tomorrow we are going to continue on like a major agadita on Job and also a bunch of other interesting things. Stay tuned. Peace out.